What's going on, 3DMJers? We welcome you to our video on the recovery diet. I'm going to start off by introing what exactly that is, comparing it to the reverse diet, and talking about why it's necessary based on where you are at the end of your contest preparation. Now, the original reverse diet, as you might have heard that's popular out there, the overall approach is to simply take a stepwise approach of slowly increasing calories to eventually get you back up to maintenance and then maybe slightly beyond once it's time to be in the full off-season mode, so that you can minimize the amount of fat gain that you have post-contest and maximize your energy intake, maximize the calories you consume, so to set you up for a great off-season to where you're starting off very lean, your calories are very high, and you are ready to make some great progress and start your next diet with more muscle mass, less body fat, and basically be in a great position of eating as many calories as possible. Now, all of those are good things. However, some of the issues with the originally proposed reverse diet are that if you take this approach too far, you may actually spend many weeks before you actually get into a surplus. And here's why that matters. So, if we look at metabolic adaptation, this is the process by which your body reduces its energy expenditure over the course of a diet to try to slow down your weight loss. This is a survival mechanism. The fastest way to reverse that is not only to increase calories, but also to gain weight. Okay? Now, I know at the end of a contest prep, when you have reached your stage perfection condition, the last thing you want to see is that your condition quickly fades away. And I would not advise just going out and just eating everything in sight like many competitors do. And certainly if you were to choose either binge eating post-show or the traditional reverse diet, I would recommend the reverse diet. But a middle of the road approach is probably even better. So the reality is that if we truly want to reverse all of the negative adaptations that come from being in a sustained deficit and losing a lot of body fat, unsurprisingly, we have to get out of a deficit and gain body fat at an appropriate rate, which we're going to talk about. So, the recovery diet also takes in mind that you're not just simply a robot who can eat whatever you've been told and just hit things on the money all the time. Even the most hardcore bodybuilders struggle sometimes even more with the period after prep compared to prep itself. So, expecting an extremely regimented, small, stepwise increase in calories to be good for adherence is probably unrealistic. So, the recovery diet, in contrast to the reverse diet, is where we actually get out of a deficit immediately and start very slowly adding weight, but still focusing on weight gain. And we're going to talk about the appropriate rates of weight gain based on when your next contest is, what your stage weight is, whether you're male or female, all of those things in the next part of this video. But for now, the important thing to remember is that it's not just about adding calories, but also purposely gaining body fat. Remember, being shredded is not conducive to gaining muscle mass. It's only conducive to doing well in a bodybuilding stage. The only time we need to be shredded is when we're on stage. Now, that doesn't mean you want to get so heavy that it's a pain in the ass to diet all the way back down until you're shredded. But it does mean that we want to spend the minimal amount of time being in this peak condition so that we can actually get back to making muscular progress in the off season. So, the only reason to have shredded glutes is if you want to be on stage. For a bodybuilder who's focused on making off-season progress, we want to get back to an appropriate level of off-season condition so we can start making gains for the next season. So, the reverse diet is about adding body fat, believe it or not, but at a slow, controlled rate, and only up to a point where it's a reasonable start to your off-season, and increasing calories. And also, reversing some of the behavioral things that go on. So, getting a little bit less OCD about your food control, a little bit less exacting. Instead of focusing so much on I've got to weigh everything to the gram, I've got to be within plus or minus 5 grams of my protein, carbs, and fat, I can never eat out, we start to relax these things so we can get back to being a normal human. We're trying to not only recover physiologically, but also psychologically. Okay? So let's talk about where you are at the end of prep. At the end of prep, physiologically, you're going to have a huge amount of hormonal shutdown. For men, it means your testosterone is going to be bottomed out. For women, this means that you will probably have seen a complete cessation of your menstrual cycle, and this can have serious consequences if you don't have a menstrual cycle for the long-term period. This means you're not secreting estrogen, which can be bad for your bone density long-term and can have consequences later in life. So the state that we've gotten into at the end of contest prep is actually not that healthy. To get incredibly lean requires a lot of hard work, and it beats your body up. So we don't want to stay incredibly lean for that long at all. We want to get incredibly lean to get on stage, and then we want to slowly get back to a healthy position. So hormonal levels drop down to the bottom. This has negative effects on sleep. This has negative effects on libido, your ability to put on muscle mass, and for women, health consequences long term. So other things, your leptin and ghrelin, one's going to be super high. Your ghrelin, that's your hunger signals. Leptin's going to be bottomed out. So you're going to be physiologically very hungry. It's very easy to overeat. Your body is telling you consume food, and it won't tell you you're full. Your sleep is going to be messed up, primarily because of these hormonal issues, and also from some psychological issues that happen. Your TDEE, that's your total daily energy expenditure, is going to be maximally adapted as low as it can be. We try to mitigate that as much as possible during prep, but at the end, you're basically going to be burning a lot less calories for your body weight than you would if this was just your normal body weight, if you hadn't had to diet to get here. So you're primed to gain fat because not only are you very, very hungry and won't get full, you're burning very few calories. And finally, you'll probably notice that your performance has spiraled down, and it's very difficult for you to maintain your strength. So at the end of prep, we're in a non-ideal place for muscle mass gains, and we want to get out of that, okay? Psychologically, probably even more importantly than the physiological stuff, your irritability is going to be up. You might find yourself more easily angered, more easily stressed. In one case study of a natural bodybuilder going through a 6-month contest prep and getting very lean, this is a professional natural guy in the IFPA, his mood state got worse by 7-fold. That means as his normal stress levels were, 7 times more stressed over the course of a diet. And that's not uncommon. Food focus can get much higher. Preoccupation with food is reported by more than 80% of bodybuilders during contest prep, okay? So that means you're going to be very, very food focused psychologically, physiologically extremely hungry and won't get satiated, highly stressed, so if you tend to stress eat, all these things can compound. It's not uncommon for bodybuilders to develop almost temporary eating disorders in this period. And it makes it even worse if you're trying to use that old school, and that's not old school, it's actually quite new school, but the idea that I want us to get away from that reverse diet of slowly adding food but staying in a deficit. Because then you might find you're going to binge because you're still in a deficit, right? And then you're going to have a cyclical response of, oh, I need to eat, I need to try to cut after that binge. And this almost turns into kind of like bulimia, okay? So we got to be very careful of eating disorders that can come from this food focus and this mood state. And this is all compounded by the fact that you don't have as clear of a goal anymore. So in the off season now you might be taking a full year off. It might be at least 6 months before you start your next prep, up to a year and 6 months. So all of a sudden, you've got this kind of post-contest blues, empty nest syndrome. You don't have a clear goal, you're stressed, you're hungry, your strength's in the toilet, and you're just not feeling too good, okay? So for all of these reasons, we need to get you out of this situation so we can start having a productive off-season. But we also need to do it in a structured way and give you some goals so that you don't overeat and totally blow yourself out of the water and gain something like 20 kgs of body fat in your first 2 months like I did my first season. So we don't want to be on the extreme end of the reverse diet. We don't want to be on the extreme end of binge eating almost every day after your contest.
Okay, 3DMJers, so now that you've listened to Coach Helm's portion of this video and hopefully you've bought in to this whole recovery diet scheme and that you've realized that we do need to get you out of the fragile state that you're in and sooner than later. How do you go about doing that? What are your first steps? Well, that's what I'm going to outline for you here. And really to outline this in the most complete context is we have to really think about this in terms of 2 scenarios. Number 1, you've got more shows. And number 2, either you're done or the next show that you're going to do is quite a ways out. Okay, so first let's go over scenario 1. You've got more shows to do. If your show is under 1 month away, you can probably get away with either a small celebratory meal the night after your show or a traditional breakfast. So what this would look like is, basically your next show is not for 2, 3, 4 weeks away. And again, keep in context the time frame that we're looking at. If you're doing back-to-back shows and back-to-back weekends, you may not be able to get away with either of these things. However, if you're looking at, maybe a month away, okay, maybe 5 or 6 weeks away, you could probably get away with one or the other. A small celebratory meal, what would that look like? Usually in the, with taking into consideration peak week and all the carbs that you've been eating, you can probably get away with a meat and a steamed vegetable, okay, out with your family and friends that have come to support you. If you're a vegetarian, then you could probably have like a tofu or seafood salad, something to that effect. Or if you could wait until the next morning, you could skip the celebratory meal and then just go out for a traditional breakfast, something like pancakes, eggs, toast, hash browns, something like that. That would be kind of a step, a recovery step if you've got another show coming up in a fairly, proximal future, I guess you might say. Now, let's say that your show is like 1 to 4 months away. Maybe it's 2 months away. Maybe it's 3 months away is your next show. You can probably get away with both. You can probably go out and have your small celebratory meal. With that meal, since you have some more time to prepare, you could probably get away with a starch with that meal. So if you were having a seafood salad, you could probably get away with having croutons on your salad and maybe the bread that comes as an appetizer. Okay, you could have your meat, steamed veggies, and a potato and rice or something like that, or rice, and then have your traditional breakfast as well. Go out, have your pancakes, eggs, bacon, toast, etc. Okay, and in these cases here, you could probably get away with not even tracking your breakfast and just getting right back on your regular macros for the rest of that day and not track the breakfast. Or if you had the celebratory meal the night before, don't track that, get back on. Okay, so now let's cover scenario 2. Either your show is 4 or more months out, or you're done for the season and you're ready to start your recovery diet. So obviously, I don't think anybody's going to argue. You're going to have your celebratory meal that night with your family and friends of whatever it is that you want. I know that we're not going to get any arguments there. And you're going to start off with having 3 untracked square meals. Okay, so what might that look like? Breakfast out with family, if family are still around, at Denny's, IHOP, whatever, pancakes, eggs, continental breakfast that might be at the hotel. You're going to have a square lunch. Okay, that could be, just cheeseburger, fries, and a milkshake. Pizza, what have you, just a square meal. No, binging by any means. And then have yourself a nice square breakfast, either a homemade meal at home with the family. Don't forget dessert, okay? But have yourself 3 untracked square meals the day after your show. And then the following day, go back on your planned macros that you've got set for your next show that's 4 more months away, or start your recovery diet plan. And for the next steps on setting up your recovery diet plan, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Alberto Nunez.
Now that we have a firm understanding of what happens to us over the course of a contest prep diet, we understand why the recovery phase is so important. So your off season does not start the minute you set foot off that stage, nor is that when your contest prep diet ends. We have something to tend to. That's the recovery phase. And to me, that is one of the hallmarks of a complete approach to contest prep dieting. You need to have a block after the fat loss phase of a contest prep diet where we're focusing on one thing, not off season and PRs, one thing, and that is recovery. Okay? So general recovery diet guidelines, this means this applies to most situations out there. Okay? Not everyone, most. So what is the time frame? How long should a recovery diet last? For most, it's going to be somewhere around 4 weeks. So it's not to say that the first 4 weeks we're going to fix everything. Not at all. It just means that during the first 4 weeks, we're going to set up a lot of the groundwork to eventually have a lot of those symptoms we went over start to slowly dissipate. So weight gain is what we're after here. How much weight gain? And this is going to include some body fat. Not all of it's going to be body fat, but some of it certainly will. So somewhere around 5 to 10% above your contest weight. Okay? Let's write out an example. So let's use that typical 160-pound bodybuilder, because all natural bodybuilders are 160 pounds. That is a joke. But let's put them at the lower end. The lower end has this person at about 168 pounds, the high end 176. That's not to say that the low end is better than the high end. If the person that's at 168 pounds is having a better recovery diet. No, not at all. Let's just really quickly give out 2 examples of why you might end up closer to 5% or why you might end up closer to 10%. So let's just take someone who is very lean, naturally lean, really low body fat set point, right? perhaps for them, right around the 4-week mark, they're approaching 170 pounds and they're starting to feel good. A lot of those symptoms we went over, they're starting to vanish. They're feeling good. For them, that might be more appropriate. Let's take someone who is not naturally lean, so just naturally a person that carries a little bit more body fat. Perhaps this was even their first contest prep diet, and the first time you get into really good shape, those symptoms, well, not until you experience them can you really understand why that person might need a slightly faster rate of gain. For them, perhaps 176 pounds or maybe even a little bit higher might be more appropriate. So for them, they might need to find themselves at the higher end of 10%. So again, most of us are going to end up somewhere around here, some a little higher, some a little bit lower, but generally that's a good place to be after the first 4 weeks. So obviously to make this happen, we're going to have to play with these two variables, cardio and calories. During the course of your contest prep, typically what you see is cardio goes up, calories go down. We're going to do the exact opposite here. So how much cardio should we cut right away? A good place to start is getting rid of all excess cardio. All excess cardio would be anything that you added over the course of your contest prep diet. So if in the off season, say you were doing 2 cardio sessions a week, and at the end of your contest prep diet, you were doing cardio every day, then a good place to start is going right back to those 2 sessions instead of those 7 you were doing at the end of your contest prep diet. So cardio, quite simple. Calories, obviously we don't want just a maintenance. We don't want to get just a maintenance. We want to have a surplus, a pretty obvious surplus. And in fact, this surplus is probably the biggest surplus you will see over the course of your whole off season, because the goal is to gain weight at a rate that would most likely be inappropriate for any other time during your off season. So in many cases, we can see a surplus that is, depending on the size of the athlete, anywhere between 400 to even 1,000 calories above maintenance. Okay, we will do this until we get somewhere around here, and once the person starts to feel a lot better, at that point we go back down to a caloric intake that is going to have them gaining at a rate that is much more appropriate given their training age and other variables. So a rate of gain that is more typically seen over the course of an off season. So that covers the first 4 weeks.
The recovery diet, we have to understand that it's probably going to create a little bit of insecurities and some anxieties and even some fear, because we're very used to, the reverse diet and the methodology behind that, staying, lean for long periods of time post-show, trying to really ramp up our calories, try to improve our metabolism. So, to ask someone, hey, we want you to actually gain a fair amount of fat, right from the get-go, it can definitely raise some insecurities and, again, some fear and anxieties. And also, keep in mind that we've worked extremely hard for weeks on end to get in the best shape of our life, for our show. So to kind of see that conditioning start to slip away, immediately post-show can definitely, again, bring those insecurities into play. And we have to remember that with a recovery diet, the goal is to kind of get out of the state that we're in leading up to a show where we're at our very leanest. And for those of you who have competed before, the experiences you've had with that last leg of contest prep as far as training. Your leverages aren't really that advantageous because we're extremely lean, and also our energy levels are kind of hit or miss. So our gym performance kind of goes along with that. It's either hit or miss, and we struggle to kind of keep adding weight to the bar. Our bench press, our deadlift, our squats. I know for me personally, getting under a squat bar, 2 weeks before my shows, it was more of a chore. It was something that I had to force myself to do. So we want to kind of get out of that state. We want to, look towards the future post-show. We want to go, okay, well, I want to better myself for my next show. In order to do that, I need to get my performance back up to speed. I need to get my leverages back up to speed so I can put more weight on the bar, so I can keep progressing, get back to that state where we need to as far as getting better for our future shows. So, our overall energy is going to improve once we, add that fat back on and we get those calories coming in. Our overall energy, our overall mood, our libido, our testosterone levels, all these good things are going to start happening a little bit better if we get ourselves out of that state where we're in right during that last leg of a contest prep. And we also have to kind of look at it from a different perspective. And one perspective I like to look at is that, when we're dieting down for shows and we're slowly basically control starving ourselves and we're getting extremely lean, if we kind of look at, the Ice Age and a caveman, if we were doing that as a caveman, the goal wouldn't be, I want to get shredded. The goal would be, I need to find food so I can make sure I don't die. And so basically from that perspective, we don't want to basically keep being that caveman, slowly starving for weeks on end. We want to basically, find something that we can go and hunt and make sure we're well fed so we can have more productive hunts. And we could basically, if you kind of correlate that with weight training, it's kind of like you're going to have better hunts or better weight training because you're going to be well fed and you're going to basically have, that essential body fat that we need to make ourselves as productive as possible. So hopefully this kind of sheds some light and kind of reassures you that, with the recovery diet, definitely the goal is, again, to kind of get ourselves back to our normal self so we can, perform better in the gym, so we have better energy, we have better recovery, we have better overall mood, and we're a much happier person to kind of be around as opposed to, that person who's kind of limping, at 6% body fat. We want to basically get ourselves back to some normal.
Here in this final portion of the video, we're going to go over some strategies that you can use as you transition into the off season, and then we'll end with a summary of our generic recovery diet protocol and how we use that as coaches with many of our athletes on 3DMJ. So while precision and accuracy are extremely important when you actually are in contest prep, we have to learn how to kind of get out of that and move from it into our off season. So we have a nutritional tracking system here based on tiers. We have tiers that are good, better, and best. They are all positive because they are better than the alternative of not tracking at all. So best case scenario, probably when you're in prep, you're tracking all three of your macronutrients in a plus or minus 5 gram range. Maybe a few weeks later, you're feeling comfortable enough to make that a 10 gram range on all three. Then after that, say it's fat, we got 10 grams plus or minus, and then protein and carbohydrates, you loosen that up to 20 grams. If you got that down, you feel like you can eyeball that, it feels good, your body weight's doing what you want it to, then we have better, which would just be protein, and then tracking your calories, plus or minus 100. If you know that protein's not a problem, you always have your minimum requirement met, then you go into the good category, and it's just plus or minus 100 calories in accordance to your goals. Also remember that you can borrow from days. So yeah, we say plus or minus 100 calories on average. So maybe you want to borrow like up to 20% of your calories from Friday because you know you're going out on Saturday. That's totally fine. And then another way of being even looser with it would just be habit-based tracking. So if you notice that you're under eating protein unless you're really keeping track of it, if that's a habit that you need to pay attention to, maybe that's just a check mark. Am I getting my minimum requirement that I'm supposed to? Maybe you don't eat fruits and vegetables unless you're really paying attention. That's your kind of check box. Another way to use habits is if you're trying to gain but you're unintentionally losing, make sure that after each meal you're a little bit overly satisfied. And vice versa, if you find yourself unwantingly gaining a little bit, maybe the meals that aren't around your training, you decide to leave a little bit left on the plate than you normally would. So there's definitely a lot of gray area that you can fall in. Some people do just fine with their habit-based kind of intuitively gauging how they feel based on fullness and hunger levels. Some people really almost need to be up here. Some people fall in the middle. I personally do. But it took me a while after my last prep to get there. Some people can immediately just start eating by feel and it works out for them. So this is again from the most precise to least precise, but again we only need to be as precise as possible to get towards our goal. So as long as you're continually weighing in and looking at your weekly averages, you can find whichever one of these works for you. So let's go ahead and close this video out with the summary of our generic recovery diet protocol. Remember here that the goal is to gain some body fat. It is not to get fat. It is not to stay the same. It is to put on some body fat in an appropriate amount that allows us to recover and heal and initiate a productive off season. So as Berto talked about, that will be between 5 and 10% within the first 4 to 6 weeks. How do we do that? Well, immediately after your show, you get to have your celebratory meal. And then if it's the end of the season, maybe you add an untracked full day of 3 square meals on Sunday. Following that, we'd create a surplus of 1 to 2 pounds per week until we do reach this goal. Once we've hit that, we can decrease the surplus and level off to a normal rate of gain for an average lifter, which would be 0.5 to 1.5% of your body weight per month. And then habit-wise, we'll go ahead and move through those nutritional tracking tiers till you get to an appropriate method that works for you and your goals continuing onward. Now, although this is what we aim for, this is not a 100% exact science and it doesn't work for everybody. We have to also consider the client's history, everything that we've developed with them and learning their personality over the last few months of working with them, their body's weekly response. So maybe we aimed for this rate, but 3 weeks in, they've already hit their 10%. Well, we need to change what we're doing. You also have to consider the personality and the fears of the client. If gaining at this rate or discussing somewhere in this range kind of brings about some type of terrified response to gain, well then we might need to nudge them a little bit slower than this and continue to explain why gaining body fat is important. We also have to take into consideration their competition schedule. Are they a pro that has to compete again next year? Or was this a first-time competitor who's ready to embark on a 2 to 3 year off season? If the second person, this is probably a good fit. If it's the first person, maybe we slow down this whole process so that we're in closer shooting range next time we prep, which should be pretty soon. But most of all, we have to consider that the end of the season requires us to put the human before the athlete. Sometimes in prep, we ask our athletes to do things that are not conducive to normal life. Once we've come out of that, if someone changes jobs or gets married or has to go away for school and they realize immediately that tracking is no longer an option, then maybe immediately, although this would be ideal, we have to figure out, okay, now we're really basing our progress on hunger and satiety levels. Or maybe they have a change in career and they want to be a fitness model and they're needing to hold out on this for a little bit. So the main idea here is that although this seems ideal and this is what we plan for, we are working with humans and it's not always an exact science. The art of it is making this fit within someone's lifestyle and their goals so that they can continue their desired progress over time. That is recovery diets in a nutshell. If you have any further questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching and we'll talk to you soon.